Hey, this is Matthew and welcome back to Nerd News Today, and it's time for another minifigure painting video. Now you guys here know that not that long ago I got into Warhammer 40k. I started to do a few videos showing my process and my journey in painting those little minifigures, and well, it's been a while since I've posted one of those. And it's not to say that I haven't been painting my figures, although granted I do have quite a large pile of shame at this point. But we're going to come back to more minifigure painting very soon, and part of the reason for that is because we got this bad boy right here. Today we're taking a look at the Army Painter Mega Paint Set, and this was supplied to me by the folks at War Games Delivered. So this big box set here we're looking at today comes with 50 different paints, a brush, and I think some other things in there. So without further ado, let's go ahead and unbox this paint set and see if it truly is mega. So first things first, when you open it, you're going to notice that there's a lot of different booklets here and some different pamphlets, so let's just take a quick look at those. We've got a single page pamphlet here about the full range of the Army Painter war paints. There's 124 of them total here, that's a lot of paints. And yeah, we got, like I said, about 50 of them to start with here. And just so you guys know the breakdown, that's 39 different paints, 5 metallic paints, 4 washes, and 2 different effect paints. Then we also get a very handy dandy little notice about what the heck to actually do when you open up these paints, which to be quite honest is pretty useful for a beginner. It might seem like common sense to a lot of you guys, but even just telling you to empty out the medium on top of it, if you're a novice, that could be a little scary. You might be wondering why your paint's got this weird goo on top. Well, there's your answer. We've got a pamphlet that shows us more of the products in the Army Painter range, which includes all sorts of hobby tools, primer sprays, different quick shades and tones, a whole variety of brushes, some of the different sets you're gonna get, and other partnerships they've got with different companies, including some Dungeons & Dragons paints, Zombicide paints, Rising Sun, and a few other things. Following that, we've got the War Gamers Army Painting Guide. Now you guys might notice that it says free on the front of it, so chances are, yeah, this isn't exactly any amazing thing to kind of get, but to be quite honest, having taken a look at this thing, it's actually really informative. One of my earliest Warhammer 40k videos was in fact that beginner's magazine that they sell, and yes, they sell that because it comes with a miniature. I think that's like $12 or $13, and it's a pretty thick magazine. It has a lot of information, it talks a lot about the lore of everything. It's pretty darn good, but you gotta pay some money to get that, and part of that is because you're getting that free miniature with it, quote unquote free. In the case of this Army Painter Guide, this they give away. I guess if you go to certain model stores, they'll have this for you. And I have to give them credit. It's actually very informative. And as far as free goes, this is 24 pages of some pretty solid information that I found to be very good, easy to read, and a lot better of an entry point than that Warhammer 40k magazine because, well, again, this is only 24 pages. There's no lore or discussion about Warhammer. There's no real talk about how to play the game. You're just getting the basics of how to make a miniature and how to paint it. It shows the application of the paint on a lot of different models. It shows you how to use the spray paint. This is pretty informative. I like this one a lot. This is a very informative book, and it doesn't just act as a commercial for the Army Painter range of products. It actually does tell you how to work just in general with painting. A lot of good tips, a lot of good information. So even if this wasn't part of the set, I would still recommend this for beginners. And then lastly, before we get to all the paints, we've got a thank you card, as well as a little customer service notice telling us who to contact if something's missing or broken, or maybe farted on by this goblin, because there's this little atomic thing coming out of the bottom of there, so I'm gonna assume he just pooted on that box. But let's get to the main attraction now, because you guys are here to see the paints and see what that's all about. So let's go ahead and take a look now at what's in the box. So as we mentioned, this has got 50 paints in it. It's a variety of different colors and tones. And one of the things I actually liked right away when I opened this up was that they've got a cap system in place. And what that means is you've got a way of identifying what each type of paint is without having to read the label, and that's actually really handy to have. Now at this point in the video, I'd actually like to show off some of these Citadel paints here so that you guys can see what I'm talking about with the difference between the tips and the caps. So we're looking right now at a few different types of Citadel paints here. We've got a shade paint, a base paint, a dry brush, a technical paint, and a layer paint. And you guys can see that for the most part, the caps are all identical. The difference in this base paint here is that this one has a white cap, but I think that's because it's a metallic. Otherwise, you're basically seeing everything looking identical. And the only way you'll know what the difference is if you get up close and read it. So you can see it says layer, it says technical, it says dry, base, shade. And I think shade tends to be actually in larger pots. But that's the only physical differentiation between these things here. Now, if you remember my very first Warhammer 40k video, I actually used the incorrect paint for that. I think for what I was doing, I was supposed to have been using a layer paint, but I used a dry paint instead. And you might be saying, I should have known better, I should have read the label. And that's true, I did read the label, but I guess I didn't fully understand what the difference is. And the fact that everything looked the same also, I just assumed that was the blue I needed because it looked like the blue I needed. So if we bring in now a few of the Army Painter paints that you see here, you'll notice that the caps are very different from each other. And I think that's an important thing to have because for a beginner, it's not quite as intuitive as you may think. especially when it's your first time painting. It kind of is stressful. You're trying to rush to make sure your paint doesn't dry, or any disaster that can happen when you're a novice or even a pro. So the fact that we've got these different tips here, that actually makes a big difference, I think, for beginners in particular, but even moving ahead, I think it's still great to have, because you can just basically look for a tip and you know what you're looking for, as opposed to having to rummage through your giant bin of Citadel paints and discover what you need. And on the topic of paints, I want to discuss paint names a little bit more too, because again, I've brought back some of my Citadel paints, and one of the things that is just super annoying about Citadel paints is they all have these names where if you don't know what they're talking about, you don't know what they do, you don't know what they mean. You have to basically look up different tutorials or use the Citadel Paints app to discover what paints you need. And on one hand, it's cool because these names like Hoeth Blue, Waystone Green, Dawnstone, Biel-Tan Green, for the most part, oddly enough, the paints I just happen to randomly pull are not the worst examples necessarily, but like Hoeth Blue, Dawnstone, Biel-Tan, Waystone, even Retributor Armor, 2 Degree, they're very much based around the lore of Warhammer, as opposed to this having been called, let's say, Armor Gold, or this could have been some kind of Arctic Blue shade. But I don't want to get into basically complaining a ton about Citadel paint names, because they are creative and they serve a purpose within the game's lore. But what I think I prefer is the Army Painter paints, because, well, frankly, they're just a lot more easy to understand and grasp. And these are just a bunch I grabbed at random as well here. So let's see what I've pulled out. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different paints from the Army Painter line. And the names are much more intuitive. And that's not to say we're not getting some weirder names, I suppose. But I mean, Dragon Red, I think you know what Dragon Red looks like. It's very evocative. Alien Purple, same thing. Necrotic Flesh. Oak Brown, you know it's meant for a tree. Jungle Green looks like a jungle. It's that bright jungle green that you think of when you think about jungles. Goblin Green, this is totally a goblin color. Barbarian Flesh. For the most part, the names are very intuitive. You're not going to need to go digging around trying to look for all sorts of various colors that are named for specific chapters in a Warhammer game. And of course, part of that is because Army Painter paints are meant for a broader range of things. They're not just meant specifically for the Warhammer 40k universe. But what I'm really talking about here is the approachability and accessibility to the paints with names that just make more sense right off the bat. And just taking a quick glance at all the different paints that I have in the line, that's not to say there aren't going to be a few more interesting ones. But for the most part, I think the names just make sense to what they go with. And they have a big old swatch on front, so you know what the color actually will look like once it's on a model or on a paper. Now, I'm not going to name every single color that we get here, but you're going to see at the back of the box, it's going to list everything that's there. And of course, you're going to see now a lot of different B-roll of many of the different colors and tones you get in here. But there's some really nice ones here. And really, for me, the big thing about these paints, unlike Citadel paints, is that these are dip bottles. These are not the paint pots I'm used to getting with the Citadel paint. These are actually the ones that you squirt out and the paint comes out of the top. And I've seen so many great debates about what's better, the pots or the bottles. It's a big thing in the painting community, and I guess now I'm about to be part of that community too, because, well, we're going to see which one's actually better. But as far as colors go, you've got your primaries, you've got your secondaries, you've got, of course, as we mentioned, the metallics and the tones. Those are actually things I'm very interested in checking out, as well as the quick shade washes, because I'm a big guy that does a lot of washes on my minifigures, and I've heard very good things about the Army Painter ones, so those I'm going to be looking forward to trying very soon. Aside from the secondary and primaries, we've also got a few other brighter colors out there. We've got a few things that are a little bit less earthly, you could say. We've got some neon pinks and some purples that should really add a lot of pop to some of the minifigures that you're working on. And just a quick aside, for anybody out there who does have Citadel paints already, or is thinking about getting rid of the Citadel paints, who wants to go to Army Painter, I believe there is a conversion chart out there, and that lets you know which of these paints matches up with the Citadel paints. That's really kind of unrelated to this review, but just a heads up for you guys out there who are working within both those two different paint systems. There is a way to get them to collaborate together. And of course, we cannot forget that this comes with a brush. This box set comes with an Army Painter Wargamer Regiment brush. This is a nice all-purpose brush. You can see here it comes with a little cap as well to keep the bristles safe. Looks like it's a nice size, do a lot of good detail work with, as well as just nice good layering. And this is actually my first time holding an Army Painter brush, and I gotta say it feels pretty good. I wasn't sure how I was gonna feel about it because the shape of it is this kind of triangular shape. And in my mind, that felt like it was gonna be very uncomfortable and awkward to hold, but it actually feels pretty nice, and I kinda like the resistance my fingers get when I'm squeezing against it. So this box set here is going to cost you $130, and keep in mind you are getting 50 different paints plus the brush. And I'm getting quite a variety here, which is really excellent also. It's a whole bunch of different shades and colors, as we mentioned. It's going to save me a lot of time later on having to go to the store to buy things again, because that's always a problem I've had when I started doing Warhammer 40k was I would need this paint or I would need that paint. In this case, they're giving you a lot of options right off the bat. And to be honest, that is a price you really can't beat. So in terms of value, this is already an A+. Now, how do the paints actually work? Well, that's going to be for next time, because next time around we are going to do some minifigure painting, and I'm going to actually, for the first time ever, test out Army Painter paints, because I've heard, again, a lot of good things about them. I'm very excited I've gotten this box set from Wargames delivered, and it's about time we put these things to the test. If you're someone out there who already owns these paints and has some experience with them, I'd love to hear your thoughts on these and what I can expect from them. If there's any things I should worry about, any concerns you guys have that as a beginner I should know about, please feel free to let me know in the comments here below. So once again, a big shout out to War Games Delivered. Those are the folks who sent this box set over to me, and I'm very grateful to have this chance to finally check out Army Painter paints, and more importantly, get back to painting on camera. So stick around, folks, because next time we come back and you see these paints, we're going to be painting some figures. And we're not just talking Warhammer 40K this time around. I got a few other things we're going to try this out with as well. So until next time, I'm Matthew. This has been Nerd News Today, and stick around because we've got some painting to do.